Buckingham Palace has tonight announced the death of the oldest member of the royal family, Catherine, the Duchess of Kent.
Buckingham Palace releasing a statement confirming she died at her home in Kensington Palace.
Imagine pouring your heart into a condolence email, a genuine message of grief, only to be met with total silence. For most people, that's just an uncomfortable moment. But for Prince Harry, it turned into something much bigger. When the Duke of Kent completely ignored his message after the royal family's emotional announcement,
it's really quite sad.
Insiders say Harry lost it. And honestly, can anyone really be shocked? This wasn't just about being snubbed, it hit deeper. Harry spent years trying to prove he's still part of the royal circle, even after walking away. Yet every unanswered call, every quiet rejection, cuts like a reminder that he's an outsider now.
Buckingham Palace announced today that the oldest member of the royal family had passed away. The official notice, as is tradition, was displayed on the railings outside.
And Meghan? She knows silence is the one thing they can't control. Silence doesn't create headlines. It doesn't spark another Netflix special. It doesn't feed the story they've been selling since the day they stepped off that palace balcony. For the Sussexes, silence isn't peace, it's punishment. They thrive on noise, attention, and controversy, and without it, the spotlight dims fast. So, when even a royal cousin like the Duke of Kent decides not to reply, it's not just a snub, it's a royal message in itself. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, no matter how loud you shout. This wasn't just a snub to Harry. It was a straight-up rejection, a royal slap that said, "You don't get to control this story." The palace made it clear they don't follow his Hollywood script anymore. And the Duke of Kent's silence hit harder than any public statement ever could. While the Duke stood tall in quiet mourning, Harry couldn't resist turning grief into drama yet again.
But apparently for me, that doesn't matter.
What should have been a moment of respect for the late Duchess turned into another act in his ongoing emotional performance. The Duchess of Kent was everything the monarchy used to stand for: compassion, duty, and grace. She spent decades quietly helping the homeless, supporting charities, and handing out trophies with genuine warmth. The public adored her for her kindness, not for attention-chasing headlines. But when the world gathered to remember her legacy with dignity, Harry reportedly found a way to twist the moment into something all about him.
Is there even a way back for him as the prodigal son?
And who cares?
Instead of joining the family in silence, he turned reflection into resentment. And that's where the real insult lies. Not in what he said, but in what he couldn't stop himself from making about himself. That haunting silence from the Duke wasn't just avoidance. It was a message, a reminder that some royals still understand class, restraint, and legacy.
Those close to the Duke say he hasn't given up on finding a way to bring his family to Britain. I'm sure he'll find a way.
And trust me, what comes next might just prove Harry's lost sight of what being royal even means. Instead of honoring the Duchess's remarkable legacy, insiders claim Harry got stuck on one thing. His email, that condolence message he sent to the Duke of Kent, apparently became an obsession when he didn't get an immediate response. He expected acknowledgement, attention, validation, all wrapped in royal formality. But that's not how the Duke operates. The man's built on restraint, old-school tradition, and a lifetime of dignity that values silence over spectacle.
People don't care anymore. Harry has burnt his bridges fully with the British public.
For Harry, though, silence feels like an attack. If the spotlight isn't pointed his way, then something must be wrong. It's as if he can't grasp that real grief isn't meant to trend online or stream on Netflix. The painful irony? A duchess remembered for her quiet compassion ended up being overshadowed by her grandnephew's craving for recognition. The woman who dedicated her life to kindness and humility is now part of a story about ego and entitlement. While the Duke of Kent continued to mourn with grace and privacy, Harry reportedly fumed behind the scenes like a teenager left on red. It's that reaction, that inability to handle dignity, that shows just how far he's drifted from the royal values he once represented.
If you open the door even a tiny crack, these two are going to keep on damaging your reputation.
And here's the kicker. His fury was just warming up. When news of the Duchess's passing broke, Harry rushed to send his condolence email, hoping to appear respectful. But those close to the palace whisper it wasn't compassion driving him, it was performance. Another chance to look like the misunderstood prince on the world stage, even when the moment called for silence. For someone who never stops preaching about privacy, Harry sure seems obsessed with being noticed. Every message, every gesture, every moment, it all needs to be seen, acknowledged, and applauded. That condolence email wasn't just about paying respect. It was a subtle cry for attention, a performance disguised as empathy.
That I won't be able to show, my children my homeland.
But here's the thing. The Duke of Kent isn't Meghan's Hollywood PR team. He's not here to play into scripted emotion or feed the Sussex brand. He's a man molded by monarchy, a figure of old-world dignity who doesn't bend for social validation. While Harry reportedly sat there, refreshing his inbox like a man waiting for applause, the Duke carried on quietly, as royals do, choosing grace over gossip. And the irony? It's royal hypocrisy at its finest. The same man who claimed to escape Britain's toxicity suddenly can't stand the institution's silence. The same prince who condemned the palace for emotional coldness now craves its approval more than ever.
She wasn't a rebel. She did what she wanted, but she was always very conscious of her position and, never wanted to upset the Queen, and nor did she upset her.
Instead of honoring the Duchess's passing with reverence like the rest of the family, Harry reportedly turned that lack of reply into a meltdown. It stopped being about grief the moment it became about him. What should have been a silent moment of respect turned into yet another chapter of ego and entitlement. A true condolence is about humility, but for Harry, it became an audition for sympathy, complete with royal drama and emotional spotlighting, just another episode in the never-ending royal soap opera. And of course, Harry insists on being the lead actor. When his carefully written condolence email was met with pure silence, his simmering frustration reportedly exploded into something much uglier. For anyone who actually understands royal tradition, the Duke of Kent's quietness wasn't an insult at all. This is a man molded by decades of service, loyalty, and royal discipline. In the monarchy, silence during mourning isn't coldness, it's respect. Words are rationed, gestures are subtle, and dignity always outweighs drama. But Harry? He took that silence like it was a dagger to the heart, unable to see the grace behind it.
Because Harry is so pig-headed and arrogant and stubborn when it comes to that I don't think he'll ever.
Instead of recognizing that the Duke was honoring the Duchess in the most noble, private way possible, Harry reportedly stewed in resentment, pacing, venting, and convinced he'd been purposely ignored. It's a pattern now. When things don't revolve around him, he spirals. And here's the harsh reality. Not every quiet moment is rejection. Sometimes silence is just peace, not punishment. But Harry, raised in privilege and addicted to validation, can't seem to grasp that. Every pause feels personal, every silence feels staged against him, and every family gesture turns into a scene. To him, if he's not the center of attention, something must be wrong.
Where she regularly handed out trophies, she supported a charity for homeless people.
And that's exactly why the palace keeps its distance. To Harry, silence isn't protocol, it's betrayal. The Duke of Kent stayed firm in royal tradition, honoring the moment with dignity, while Harry twisted that quiet restraint into a personal attack. That's not sensitivity. That's pure entitlement turned up to the max. The irony couldn't be sharper. The Duke's silence represented everything the late Duchess embodied: humility, privacy, and quiet strength. But instead of reflecting on those same values, Harry reportedly reacted like a reality TV star cut from the season finale, angry, overlooked, and desperate to reclaim the spotlight. The Duchess's passing should have been about respect and remembrance, yet somehow the narrative morphed into another story about Harry's bruised pride. Behind palace doors, whispers grew louder.
She was just simply Mrs. Kent. She was just part of the staff team on that day when she came into school and taught.
Insiders claimed his frustration was impossible to ignore. Pacing calls, emotional rants, the works. And while the Duke carried himself with the same composure that's defined his entire life, Harry's response became the exact opposite: loud, dramatic, and embarrassing. If the Duke's silence was a display of royal class, then Harry's outrage was the ultimate reminder of how far he's drifted from it. But here's the twist. That little tantrum? It was just the warm-up. Because as shocking as his reaction was, this silence from the Duke of Kent wasn't the end of the story. It was the spark that lit the next scandalous chapter. A private email, a quiet acknowledgement, and then mourning. That's how it should have gone. But for Harry, that simple exchange turned into the spark that ignited yet another blaze of resentment. Instead of reading the room, he reportedly sat refreshing his inbox, spiraling deeper each time no reply came through.
I learnt more from these children than I ever taught them. They taught me, it's just indescribable. I mean that absolutely sincere.
What should have been an act of grace became an ego test, and he failed it spectacularly. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to say out loud. Harry wasn't angry because the Duke of Kent was rude. He was angry because the silence reminded him of something far worse: irrelevance. To the palace, grief comes before gossip. But to Harry, attention always seems to come before everything else. Insiders say he kept pushing, desperate for any sign of acknowledgement. as if the Duke's silence was robbing him of royal validation he still can't live without. It's almost heartbreaking how predictable it's become. The man who ran from the royal cage to find freedom still can't stop rattling the bars, begging to be seen. His anger wasn't noble, it was needy. Instead of showing compassion, he came off as a man furious that the world dared to mourn without clapping for him. And that's the real sting.
She made headlines when she broke royal protocol to hug a runner-up at the Wimbledon Tennis Championship.
This wasn't just another outburst, it was exposure. It revealed Harry's ongoing inner war. The fight between the independence he claims to love and the recognition he still desperately craves. For a man who preaches liberation, he still seems chained to one thing: the need to be noticed. And the timing? It couldn't have been worse. The media was circling like hawks, just waiting for a single crack in Harry's armor. And when it came, they pounced. The moment whispers of his outrage leaked, the headlines hit hard and fast. If Harry thought his tantrum would stay tucked behind palace walls, he seriously underestimated the same press machine he's been fighting for years. Within hours, tabloids across Britain were feasting on the drama. The story was irresistible. A prince, red-faced and fuming, all because his email got ignored. They painted him as the hot-headed royal who couldn't handle silence. A man-child raging while the rest of the nation mourned a duchess who embodied grace. The contrast was brutal.
That moment in 1993 that many will remember when the losing women's finalist Yana Novotná was incredibly distressed and the Duchess was very empathetic, hugged her.
While the Duke of Kent stood as a pillar of dignity and the rest of the royal family carried on with composure, Harry became the headline spectacle once again. Front pages screamed his frustration, twisting grief into another act of royal theater. The image he spent years trying to escape, petty, entitled, and tone-deaf, came roaring back to life. And here's what makes it sting even more. He built this trap himself. After years of feeding the press with interviews, confessions, and endless grievances, every outburst now becomes open season. The same media he once courted now uses his own emotions as ammunition. It's poetic in a way. The prince who wanted control of his story has become the story, and not in the way he hoped. The media didn't even have to exaggerate this time. Harry practically handed them the drama on a silver platter. And of course, Meghan wasn't spared either. Her name slipped into the headlines like clockwork, feeding that never-ending Sussex circus narrative the tabloids live for. What started as Harry's fury over silence turned into the loudest noise of all, a roaring media storm that dominated front pages, morning shows, and social feeds everywhere. But if Harry thought the coverage was bad, he had no idea what was coming next. Because once the tabloids had their fun, social media finished the job, and they did it with zero mercy. Within hours, Twitter, now X, exploded with memes mocking the prince who got ghosted by email.
Her most unconventional step, however, was to teach music, her greatest passion, at a state primary school in Hull, not as a royal, but as Mrs. Kent for more than a decade there.
TikTok creators stitched together hilarious reenactments of Harry furiously refreshing his inbox, while Instagram pages turned him into the punchline of the week. Hashtags like #InboxDrama, #SnubsedSussex, and #RoyalMeltdown trended worldwide, not from sympathy, but from pure mockery. Even the younger crowd, usually more forgiving toward the Sussexes, joined in the roasting. To them, this wasn't royal tragedy. It was comedy gold. They saw Harry as the overly dramatic guy who turned an unanswered message into a global event. Meanwhile, older generations weren't laughing. They were rolling their eyes, calling it yet another example of Harry dishing out criticism but crumbling the moment someone ignores him. And that's the real punchline. The silence he tried to fight only made him louder. His desperate reaction became the spectacle he swore he left behind, turning grief into gossip and proving that sometimes the loudest cry for attention starts with a single unanswered email. And here's the real kicker: social media lives for humiliation, and Harry practically handed it over with a royal ribbon on top. What he saw as a betrayal, the internet saw as free entertainment.
The King and Queen and all members of the royal family join the Duke of Kent, his children and grandchildren, in mourning their loss and remembering fondly the Duchess's lifelong devotion to all the organisations with which she was associated.
Instead of mourning the Duchess, people were too busy turning her grandson into a walking meme. Twitter threads, TikTok skits, and endless jokes made him the main event, not for his grief, but for his meltdown. Once again, Harry lost control of the narrative. Because when the world stops seeing you as a prince and starts seeing you as a punchline, your image doesn't just crack, it shatters. That unanswered email wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It became another brick in the towering wall Harry's built between himself and the royal family. Every feud, every tell-all, every public outburst has widened the gap. And this? It fit the pattern perfectly. Instead of bridging divides during a time of loss, Harry dug the trench even deeper. It's almost impressive, in a tragic kind of way, how he manages to turn moments of unity into chances for division. But the Duke of Kent's silence didn't expose cruelty. It exposed fragility. It showed just how shaky Harry's standing within the monarchy has become. He spent years torching royal bridges, and now he's shocked when no one reaches out to pull him back across. The rest of the royals move with quiet restraint. Harry moves with loud resentment, and every clash makes him look like the outsider still begging for a seat at a table he flipped over himself.
When she was in floods of tears there and deeply upset. And it was a moment, I think, where it was obvious that there was a real empathy in terms of the public engagement that the Duchess of Kent carried out.
And Meghan's shadow isn't far behind. Critics can't help but point out that together, the two have turned victimhood into a kind of brand. Polished, profitable, but dangerous. Because here's the truth. A brand built on burning bridges eventually runs out of fuel. This email drama didn't cause the royal rift. It just reminded the world that Harry has mastered the art of keeping it alive. The late Duchess of Kent left behind a legacy built on humility, compassion, and quiet service. The kind of grace that doesn't need cameras or applause. For decades, she worked behind the scenes for countless causes, never demanding recognition, never seeking validation. She embodied the timeless dignity that once defined the British monarchy. And then there's Harry, her total opposite. Where she was discreet, he's disruptive. Where she gave quietly, he demands loudly. It's almost insulting that in the shadow of her passing, Harry somehow managed to drag the spotlight back onto himself.
Duke and Duchess did not have to give up their place in the line of succession, however, as the law then demanded, because Catherine was Anglican when they married.
The Duchess will forever be remembered for her warmth and humanity, the gentle strength that touched lives without ever turning it into spectacle. But Harry, he's at risk of being remembered for something entirely different: his talent for transforming private moments into public theater. His so-called battle for truth looks less like bravery and more like desperation to stay relevant. By throwing tantrums over an unanswered email, he didn't just break royal protocol, he trampled the very values the Duchess spent her life upholding. This isn't just a generational divide, it's a philosophical one. The Duchess proved that true influence doesn't need a megaphone. Her silence carried more power than 1,000 interviews. Harry, on the other hand, keeps proving that without constant noise, he fears fading into the background. And that, more than anything, reveals how far he's drifted from the quiet strength that once defined his family. One left behind a legacy, the other seems determined to leave behind chaos. And with this latest episode, the distance between those two legacies has never looked wider.
She had a tenderness and an empathy to her that made her very memorable in some people's minds.
What began as a solemn moment of mourning spiraled into yet another reminder of just how far Harry has drifted from the very values the royal family still tries to uphold. The Duchess of Kent's passing should have been a moment of compassion, unity, and grace. Instead, it exposed ego, entitlement, and the painful clash between royal tradition and the Sussex brand of self-pity. Silence should have symbolized respect, but Harry twisted it into a tantrum. And once again, the headlines weren't about the Duchess's legacy of quiet strength. They were about his latest meltdown. At this point, the pattern's impossible to deny. Every royal event, every private exchange, somehow mutates into another saga of Harry versus the institution. The more he demands recognition, the more he looks like a man at war with his own reflection. What the Duchess built through calm devotion, Harry seems to dismantle through noise and resentment. History will remember the Duchess of Kent for her dignity, her grace, and her selfless service to others. But Harry? He risks being remembered as the royal who couldn't stop shouting into the void, a man trapped in the echo of his own drama. And trust me, if you thought this scandal was messy, just wait until you see what insiders revealed about that infamous royal wedding. We break it all down right here on T-Torch, so hit like, tap subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.